let's start with definitions and terminology. Our problem is records management is not very much known as a term in Germany. So it still needs education what records management is about. The good thing is we have very clear definitions like ISO 15489, which says any information created, received and maintained as evidence and information by an organization or person, meaning as well your private records, in pursuance of legal obligation on the transaction of business. That's a record. In Germany, we would call it a document. But we have now a new definition for a record, which adds some more ideas to the concept. And the new term in here is asset. We are talking about the value of information. And records are independent of any format. That means as well paper are records to be managed by systems or other objects. Records management is not electronic document management, but handles any type of record. With Product Consult, we have our own definition, which explains how a record is to be described. Because any type of information can become a record if it has a certain business value or legal value, if it fulfills the requirements of persistence, authenticity, defined metadata, consistency, classification, and some more. If these attributes give value to a document, we call it a record. And the same applies to records management. It's a field of management, not priority technology, but management and systematic control of working with documents or records. Then we call this records management. And it includes as well transactions and other stuff. Relevant with the ISO 15489 is it covers both private and public sector. And it's useful for archiving, although records management is not archiving. That's different. We have a lot of standards which go beyond a definition of the subject matter, which allows us to handle this information even if the content is not included in the record via the metadata. And the ISO 15489 is something like the general outline worldwide. It's the lowest common denominator of the participating countries, but it is accepted. Unfortunately, in Germany, we call this Schriftgutverwaltung, and nobody has the idea that it could be about electronic document management or even managing big heaps of unstructured information, which we now call big data. We have here as well a new definition for records management, which goes more with a focus on records systems, which is not so independent of media and format like ISO 15489. So we are talking here about management systems for records. We mean that a records management system has to have the ability to really, with a systematic and controlled approach, manage information in regard to its value. And the value of information is not only business. It might be historic value, it might be legal value, it might be political value, ethic value, organizational or administrative use. Always if we have something important to keep, that is about records management. And so we have as well a short list how records management is differentiated from document management with controlled vocabulary, classification schemes, file plans, and standardized metadata, which create a certain quality so that we really find with the same criteria the information we are looking for. Because we are not searching. We want to have and we want to find without searching. And we have another term, which is record keeping. Record keeping is somehow the basic below records management. These are the ground principles how to deal with important information, and this term derived from, well, bookkeeping, but you can use it as well for any information. So in fact, it's a theoretical basement for records management. And with records keeping come as well the generally accepted record keeping principles, which are very new and which I really love to introduce to you. Because beside all these standards, which might come up with 1,000 pages of technical documentation, GARP is very simple. You can break it down on 8 pages and you have covered everything which is important for records management. So, who created this? It was not AIM, it was another association, and believe me, that was the only good thing this association did in the last 50 years. The good thing is as well for us here in Switzerland, they are talking about records management, and there is now a chapter of ARMA in Switzerland. And they have a really big community of records managers there, but unfortunately in Germany, which is much bigger, we don't have any interest in such a community. ARMA published 8 principles: accountability, integrity, protection, compliance, availability, retention, disposition, and transparency. And the principle of accountability means that there must be some responsible person who cares for information management and record keeping. And that is not an IT person, that is the CEO, the managing director of the company. He has the legal obligation to set up the governance rules for records keeping and records management. And so you need an executable program which gives advice to every employee and partner in the enterprise how to deal with information and what is the value of information for the business. Second is the principle of integrity. That means the information objects plus their metadata, plus their context, plus their linkage must be consistent over time so that we can prove that the information has been kept in the way as it was originally generated. And you know that could be very complicated in an era where we change formats every hour. That means we need tools like audit trails, probably archiving, and other helpers to ensure this capability of a records management solution. Third, the principle of protection. The systems and the people and the processes, these 3 together must protect the record that it cannot be altered or deleted. Fourth, all this has to be done in conjunction with the legal and regulative compliance regulations. So there's always a big argument why we are doing this. Beside the business case, the lawmakers ask us to do this. And to be compliant is one of the major reasons why there is records management. So every organization must be able to follow these laws, and records management software with controls help you to do this. Number 5, availability. There, on the one hand, is the availability for audits, the compliance regulation. But on the other hand, you have to recognize that records keep part of your knowledge of the company, knowledge which you want to use over time as experience. It's not to reinvent the wheel if you're developing new products. So there is business value as well in records management beside the legal obligations. Number 6, principle of retention. The value of information changes over time. And so, as well, there are retention periods defined by laws or by the life cycle of information. And retention periods means as well that you delete information which is outdated or no longer needed, something which most people do not do, and that's why we have this growing heap of information. Most of it is old, outdated, and redundant. The amount of original information in this big heap is getting smaller. And so we have the principle of disposition, getting rid of no longer useful information, and that could be even a legal case, because in America we face the situation that more people have been brought to court because information has been found which could have been deleted than vice versa. 8, and that's very important, principle of transparency. Have transparent processes, have openness, be honest, show your information, make it available. Don't hide it, like Andrew said, somewhere in islands, in silos inside your company. Make use of it as knowledge in processes. So you see, it's very easy. And what are now our standardization committees doing out of this very simple 8 principles? There are lots of committees out. And the bad thing is they consist of the same people even, but I always have the feeling they don't talk to each other. I would love if they didn't care for authorship rights and would do copy and paste, but so every organization strives to have some own interpretation and to have an own standard. And if a country is big enough, like Germany, we have always 3 of it. And if we look on the world, we have more than 2,000 standards for records management. So please don't expect me to demonstrate all these 2,000, but I will restrict myself to about 50. In fact, we have a rank-wide, unchecked, uncontrolled growth of standards for records management. A wild growth, a rank growth, which we wouldn't allow inside a records management when we are managing our records. It's a real battle. And even in the standardization organization like ISO, you cannot expect that standards are compatible and that people talk to each other. I will demonstrate this with several of the more important and more current standards from ISO. Earlier in my presentation, I've been talking about the ISO 15489, which is really the basement for all records management. And we have 2 guidelines here, a general and a more detailed, but it's on a very high level. It's technology impartial. It gives you no technical advice. It has no true authorized certification. But by the way, this is changing. There's now a standardization group within who is working on a product certification for complying with ISO 15489. Although ISO 15489 is a very high-level political document and has nothing to do with technology. I couldn't hinder them, sorry. The 4 basic principles in ISO 15489 are authenticity, trustworthiness, credibility, integrity, usability, the same arguments we already had in our 8 GARP principles. Then we have from 2006 ISO 22310, which is a very interesting ISO standard because it is a framework how to integrate records management in other business applications. Most of the vendors here wouldn't even have heard about the standard how to integrate. Ask them. Or let's look on the ISO 23081. This is about the metadata. The bad thing is they provide more than 200 attributes a record could have. So if you would fill in these attributes manually, well, nobody would work with it. But as well, we have here a standard where we can copy, where we can make use of the good ideas and the structure which is behind the standard. And we have a second document, which is a little bit newer, which really gives us a hint how a record is defined inside a system and how to generate policies and how to manage metadata across systems, not only inside the records management system, but in the systems already who generate the record, so that the record management gets automatically indexed records. Well, that's the way we would like to work. Or look on the 2011 version, where we have all the multilingual issues in it, how we handle automatic translation in the system, finding order if we give as key term Auftrag. There's a lot of good ideas in these records management standards. Or looking on the 26100/2020, by the way, who of you is a vendor or consultant and knows this one? This is how to analyze your data to say when does a document becomes a record. Very interesting document, nobody knows about it. Or look into the ISO 13008 from this year. How to convert documents into records. What backup systems do I need? How to organize the processes? What about the audit trail? That's covered here. Or look in the ISO 13028. That is for guidelines how to digitize records, to keep them legally valid, and how to compare and bring this together with digital born records. Or if we look on the ISO 15801, ever heard of it? This is about the trustworthiness and reliability. That means the legal value of records, which criteria a record has to fulfill to be legally valid in court. Or do you know this one? 16175. Oh, this is as well for SME in developing countries, which became lately ISO standard, which is more a good practice approach, how to do it. Oh, there are project management tool lists, how to introduce such technologies. Or do you know the ISO 3300 family now being 4 standards? And they reinvent the wheel. They are not talking any longer about records management, they are talking about record system, and they come up with a certification where you as a vendor can get approval that you are certified. This is all ISO stuff. They don't talk to each other. That means all these standards may be good, they have a lot of knowledge, they enable you to copy and paste for your own solution. But you cannot expect that they are harmonized and that they are stable over time. I could continue, there are quite a lot more of these. You can compare them, but I skip this and I come to a very important one which is new, which you should consider when you're going into the cloud with records management, because there is an ISO standard how to deal with records management to go to a trusted third-party repository, which normally we call a cloud. Here are the requirements, what you can ask your cloud offerer, how to deal with legally important records in the cloud. It's here, but I have the feeling nobody cares. It's out here and we should make more use of it. By the way, this was only the ISO stuff. I have covered 30 now. I cover another 20. Only to give an idea what's happening there, because you as an end user organization need not to reinvent the wheel. Everything is available and you should only make use of it. Like ICA standards, combining records management with a need of long-term archival. It's out there. Or the ICE Rec, which is for office documents. It's out there. Or the DLM Forum, creating standards for Europe over time, where we have MOREC, Model Requirements for the Management of Electronic Records, which was funded by the European Commission, where we are now in version 3 of this. This is, by the way, dependent to the American standard DoD 5015. And MOREC was started in 2000, and it should become the overall standard for all administrations in Europe how to deal with records management. But we failed because there was no certification program and there was no enforcement by European law, meaning directives. So we came up with MOREC 2, which was rather good, and it was rather useful to create tenders, for example, but this was killed by other guys who said, well, it's too complex. So MOREC 2 was starting to get better, and they started now then to create MOREC 2010. By the way, they changed as well the meaning, because MOREC 2010 means modular requirements for record systems, which is not the general overall approach covering as well paper repositories, but electronic systems only. Unfortunately, this standard is not quite finished now. We have 2012, and we are still working on the basic modules. So this old roadmap is a little bit outdated, because MOREC 2010 should come in 2010, came beginning of 2012, and we continue to strive to make it better. But in fact, it's more a technical standard. It's good for programmers. Well, not all of these modules which are depicted here are available now. So this year we have been discussing file aggregations and security categorization, which is a basic component in records management. You can look up in the documentation the details with all the links. Who have ever known that OMG created a records management standard for web services? How should a web service look like, and which schema should a web service use to handle records? They did as well this job. But the archivists ignore this because this is technical stuff about XML and UML. But as well, such a description like a service and a service-oriented architecture should work is available for records management. Nobody knows. By the way, there was one company who was looking in this. That was Microsoft with their record center. They are very near now with the 2013 web service, which was moved out of SharePoint. They are very near to this concept, how to deal with records management in SharePoint. So you will get it, although you don't know it. And we have national standards. But there's only one which really had an impact on the industry, and this is DoD 5015.2, which comes from the US Department of Defense and is used in the military industry, but as well in all the industries for aeroplanes and related machinery and so on. It's a little bit outdated, but that is the only standard where the vendors by themselves say, this is important and I do implement it for free. All the other standards we have been talking about, they say, oh, you want a standard, it will cost you this amount of money to implement it, and then the end user says, oh, if it costs money, I don't need the standard. You are yourself the ones who make standards not work, because you don't force vendors to comply with standards. So below DoD 5015, there are a lot of other standards which are important, but they are not known in Europe. for example, policy design, anti-armor, or how to identify vital information in records and to care for business continuity. Very nice one. Or how to do records management with Web 2.0 and social media. There are as well standards available to how to connect records management to social. It's already there. Nobody knows it. And how to deal with records to make them legal valuable. Germany, probably you know, in the past we had standards like Favorit, Domea, and others. This has gone, but not completely. In Germany, we have a new one since this year, but it is not a records management standard, but it was made for public sector, and it's called Schriftgutverwaltung oder elektronische Akte. This is new, but it is not really what we expect by philosophy or concept or functionality from a records management system. It's still a German approach. And this approach is called Organisationskonzept elektronische Verwaltungsarbeit or Organization Concept for Electronic Administrative Work for the Public Sector. This is not official translation because the standard is only available in German, so this terms like OKIVA may change. The core elements is that they have really a records management container, an electronic folder, or in America we would call it an electronic binder. And the most popular example for electronic binder today is a binder full of women. Probably you remember this from the discussions between Mitt and Obama. The most important thing is that there is no longer a certification. In the past, products were certified, and they recognized that it doesn't make any sense because it's important how the system is used and implemented on site. So they skipped DOMEA certification. In fact, half of the concept is already available. Electronic records, electronic workflow, a project guideline, and they're working on archiving and other parts. And wherever they don't have a document so far, they say, look in DOMEA too. So, DOMEA is dead, but it's still living because it's widely referenced and referred in the OKIVA. So what we tried is to get more simple, straightforward, without certification of products, but it's already overloaded with German specialities. For example, the use of electronic signatures with re-signing over time to keep them valid, or the email and other strange stuff which we only have in Germany, which makes systems expensive and not easy to use. I'm very sorry about that you didn't manage to leave this stuff behind. If we look to other countries, only some remarks. Very interesting is Australia and New Zealand. They are working very heavily on the standardization. They are most of the drivers of the new ISO standards. In Switzerland, we will get in January a new GEVA standard, which is already written and just in the approval process. In Brazil, they, for example, took the ISO 16175. Finland, they looked into MOREC. And so all these concepts are different and they are reinventing the wheel. For example, there are new groups established in Germany for certification of records management. The Switzerland guys as well formed a body to develop a new guideline for records management. And I don't understand this because we already have too many. And I would recommend that we forget all these proprietary standards if they come from ISO or a national government body, but that we stick to the easy way and look just in the functional requirements of the general accepted records keeping principles from ARMA. That's my recommendation, and I went out of standardization because I hate it. It's lost time. To finalize, some trends. The battle between good and bad, order and chaos, Lord of the Rings versus Bilbo. In our industry, that is the battle between records management, bringing order to information, and enterprise search, promising us with one slot you can find everything. We know that 40% of the internet is hidden from us because it's Chinese. Did you ever find Chinese documents or Indian documents? We still believe that we have all information on our fingertips, but we only see a very small segment, and if you allow cookies, you will find only the information which Google thinks you have been looking for yesterday. You will not find anything new. And when you take this idea to the enterprise, the same will happen. You have the idea that you can find everything, but you never can be sure that it's complete and the right stuff. So Googlerization and consumerization, what we do with tagging, folksonomy and other stuff, is not compliant with the records management philosophy and requirements. And it seems to be easy. Why do need to index information if I have a search engine which finds everything when I need it? I think that is a very big illusion. And to run a business, we need workflows, we need order, we need records management. Otherwise, we cannot be efficient. So we are in danger that all this new Web 2.0 social business technology make us believe that we do not need archiving and records management, that we just need some hard disk in the cloud to save our stuff, and that's everything we need. The good thing is we have automatic classification, which helps us to overcome the bottleneck of manual indexing, but we shouldn't believe too much on this. And compliance today seems to be something like the last firewall, or even like the last stand of Custer against these new technologies. Because everybody of you is wishing over your smartphone device, and you will hate to fill in a form with 30 attributes to be records management compliant. I fear all those guys who work in standardization for records management, who are thinking in academic ways and only in their gremium, that they will lose this battle if they haven't already lost it. So, the traditional funnel concept, is it already outdated? There are lots of documents. Some may become a record. Some may become an archive object which is kept for 300 years. But what we are doing now in the organization is we start archiving when we scan. We start archiving when we generate information. We start archiving at the beginning of the process. And we are not waiting until a records manager says, hey, this is important information, this is a record, please save it. We are turning this funnel around. And that's one part of the big data problem, that we no longer distinguish and separate the important stuff from just the spam. The essential question here is for the life cycle, facing the rising flood of information, big data, how do we manage efficiently without tormenting manual Sisyphus work? I think that is the term. Without tormenting manual Sisyphus work, and with safeguarding the necessary quality of metadata, the step from document to record, from record to archive object. And if this challenge is not solved by these vendors, records management will lose, and we will all be in a gamification world or Web 42 solutions. And what my colleague showed as a graph of the development of information, that was mostly on the internet. And you could say, what is the impact for my enterprise? And these are the figures for the enterprise. This is the information inside. And it's growing at an outpassing velocity. And we haven't prepared to manage this data flood inside the company. And we will face that our networks will break down if we start sending packages of 10 gigabyte just because this is a document over a network which was constructed and designed in the 90s. That's the big challenge for the IT persons in the companies, that they cannot provide the functionality and the speed like YouTube. We're still working on 3 seconds for a black and white paper image. So, the other face of the medal is dependence. If we really move away from paper, we have paper-free day today. We go to a complete dependence on our electronic systems. And that means we must put money into records management systems and archival solutions to have them redundant, double or 3 times, because when this information is lost, you can close down your business. That's always overlooked. And I believe digital and native is a false hope. Everybody thinks this generation who was raised with a smartphone and a console has all the knowledge they need to manage information. No! They are no information professionals. It's a false hope. They know how to use Facebook, they know how to wipe over a surface, but they don't know what happens with information inside. They think they are doing information management, but that's false. So what we need is more information management professionals. This is not about technology. This is about managing assets, managing records, managing information. And these people must be moved out of the cellars and the shelf presence. They must get to the beginning of the life cycle of information, to really control and manage the flow and make sure that the important information gets to the records management. They must become responsible for the process of information management from the beginning and not at the end where they are sitting now. So, information has to be managed, to be used as knowledge, to be used in processes, to be of value. And that's the message for records management. And if you want to know more about records management, visit us on 27th of November. We have a complete day on records management in German language. Thank you very much.